Battleline Podcast, we have Tom Young coming on, West Virginia Air National Guard vet with over 20 years of service, retiring in 2013. He is the author of Red Burning Sky, which is actually out tomorrow for all of you guys listening on Monday. We're going to get into some stories. We're going to talk about the Canadian trucker stuff, as you see. We'll also talk about some stuff going on in the White House, the State Department, the media. But before we do, as we always say, there's new listeners checking us out every week. And for those new listeners, my name is Ian Scott.
I am Chris Tonto in some circles.
And hopefully we didn't step on each other there, because I always notice that every time I put this back and I put it on the show, it sounds like you're stepping over me, and it's just because of this like minor time delay. I don't know why, but anyway, we're gonna figure that type of stuff out. It's just kind of funny to see. But before we get into everything, we have a great new sponsor on board that we're really excited about, and that's BioPro Plus. Now, guys out there, guys specifically, as in males, are you 35 or older? Do you currently feel like you're lacking that primal motivation, drive, and energy you used to? Do you want more out of life and to improve your performance in the gym and in the bedroom? Well, here's the deal. Every year after puberty, your growth hormone decreases, sometimes by 50% by the age of 35, and it only keeps going down from there. It doesn't matter how in shape you are or how good your diet is, it's happening to all of us. That's where BioPro Plus comes in. BioPro Plus is the first of its kind. Here's the thing. It's 100% non-synthetic, and it's an alternative to prescription HGH growth hormone treatments. It immediately replaces what your body is no longer getting, and it does it naturally, without the needles, nasty side effects, or expensive cost of the typical synthetic growth hormone treatment. Chris, it took a while for us to really stand by this product because you wanted to try it and really get on board with this before we would, we suggest it to our listeners. And we're never going to suggest anything to our listeners that we're not fully into. And as you've said before, we've talked about the effects of HGH, of steroids, and this is something that's a really strong alternative.
No, it is. And as you get older, in your 50s, like I'm almost 51, you do see a reduction. You do see reduction in energy levels and muscle mass, in libido in the bedroom, or your significant other or my wife saw some reductions in libido in the bedroom. But this is an alternative. I am strongly against HGH or steroids, anything that's synthetic. This is not. So it was great to try it and to see if it worked, and also to see if it affects my ulcerative colitis or inflammatory bowel disease, which it didn't affect it in a negative way. We try every product. We use every product that we push guys on the show. And this is another one that I am very, very happy that it, not just as part of the show and they're a sponsor, but it came into my life because it's given me more energy, more libido in the bedroom, recovery times quicker. And it's another part of our healthy lifestyle that we promote with Ned and Bubs Naturals and now BioPro. So guys, check it out. Do your research on it. If you're going to start it, though, do check with your doctor if you're on medication to see if it will conflict with that. But it is all natural, and we will never push HGH or steroids on this show, but we will push alternatives to help you get a better lifestyle, especially as you get in your older years. And this is one of them. BioPro is excellent.
Yeah, if you feel any of that stuff lagging, now is the time to check this out instead of, doing something that could have really detrimental effects on your health. And that's why we will never push that type of stuff. So Battleline Podcast listeners receive a $30 off promo by using the promo code Battleline at checkout. Just go to bioproteintech.com if you want to fix your performance in the gym, bedroom, chronic fatigue and pain, or even just how you look in the mirror. You need to go to bioproteintech.com and use the promo code Battleline for $30 off while supplies last. Bioproteintech.com, $30 off when you use the promo code Battleline at checkout. All that info is in the description. And I can't speak more highly of Darn Tough Vermont. Whenever I'm out there, especially in this weather, in my boots, it doesn't matter what socks I buy. They eventually all get eaten up. They're, no longer usable. Darn Tough, they're guaranteed for life. They make the best socks on the market. If you're tired of slipping, smell, blisters, binding, and holes, you get none of that with Darn Tough Vermont socks. They're made with the softest itchless merino wool, which are unconditionally guaranteed for life, for real. Family owned and knit right here in the USA, in Vermont. darn tough bits for every interest: hiking, skiing, snowboarding, work, athletic, running, hunting, and plain everyday use. I see you're holding them right there. And the thing about them, they're not super thick, and yet they hold up.
Oh, they're comfortable. I tried them out. Ian, you got me a few pairs, and just tried them out running around. I actually ran in them. I ran 5 miles in them when it was really cold out here a few days ago, and they're great. No hot spots, no chafing, no blistering. And then I just wear them daily with my cowboy boots when I was doing some speaking events, walking around on stage. Tremendous. No hot spots, no rubbing, no slipping. And then just daily wear me with my tennis shoes walking around the town with my wife. Tremendous, guys. They don't slip at all. You always worry about hot spots with socks, especially if you're a runner. I got none of this. Now, granted, I only ran 5 miles. You guys that are putting in half marathons and marathons, maybe you'll give us some feedback on that if you weren't. But
5 miles,
it is, and it is darn tough, and they are extremely comfortable, and they're easy to get on, and they stay up. So I've got the calf length, and then I've got the boot one, which are over the calf. Both stay up. I didn't have any of them falling or dropping down, as some socks do, because the elastic isn't that good. No, they're excellent. They're tremendous. So again, we don't push anything on the show we don't use or we don't support, and these are something that I support, and I've put them through the ringer so far in working out, daily wear, and then also up on stage in cowboy boots, walking around talking to people. So there you go. Tremendous stuff. Tremendous product.
Yep. And so many people in our audience, and we've said it before, nothing's made in the USA anymore. These are. So if you want to support a USA-made brand that's really putting out a great product, you got to put your money where your mouth is. It's darntough.com to get your pair today.
From Omaha, Nebraska to New York City, from planet Earth to extraterrestrial life in space, a podcast with no equal, engaged in unconventional warfare through your speakers and headphones. This is a show about embracing the suck, conquering your demons, and finding God in the face of adversity. Chris Tonto Peranto.
Twitch is on. Motherfucker, I'm going to shoot you in the face.
Ian Scotto.
Ian and I have been dating for a long time.
You are now tuned into the Battleline Podcast.
This switch is on. Battleline Podcast. Before we get to Tom Young, we've got plenty of news to get into. There really is no shortage of news in our realm right now. And I guess we'll start off right now with the White House and the State Department officials shutting down reporters questioning of Russia and Syria, which also played into another issue that you sent me where Lester Holt did this interview with Joe Biden and said the administration ignored warnings from top intelligence on the ground over the Afghanistan withdrawal. So there's been a little bit more pressing on Joe Biden and not all these softball.
Well, and they should be, because you're seeing these press secretaries, these spokespeople for the White House come in and give information, but provide no verification, no validity, nothing to say this is where we're getting our information from. It's just, we're telling you this, you got to believe us because we're the U.S. government. Well, I think all of us have seen over many, many years that the last people you're going to trust are the ones that work for the U.S. government by just giving you stuff at face value. I think that's been proven over and over and over again. I was in an incident where that was specifically the case, where the U.S. government and the CIA and the NSA were giving out bad information of what was going on the ground in Libya. And we're rarely getting their information from social media instead of listening to the people that were on the ground that night. So it's good to see that it's not a side, and I hate to call it sides. I don't like that. But if you wanted to, Lester Holt, and then Jake Tapper got on it, which I think he did a great job feeding off what Lester Holt's interview was and calling out the White House and specifically Joe Biden. But you're seeing that journalists are finding their integrity. and they are pushing back and saying, hey, we're not going to believe you because you're telling us this. Where is this verification coming from? And if they're not asking for intel, they're just asking, hey, where is this coming from? What leads you to believe that this is what's going on in Russia or going on in help me out? Help me out, brother. We just Ukraine, Ukraine, and then Syria, and then also you see the White House going on. I don't know who the press secretary's name is. I forget her name. Jen Psaki, where she goes out continually and says the Afghanistan drawdown. It's like it was a success. The Afghanistan, the debacle in Afghanistan seems to be a success because Joe Biden said, hey, we're going to get out at this time, and he did. What? That we're not questioning that. It's how it would happen. And now you're deeming it a success, even though it's a massive failure and many, many lives were lost. Another country was completely destabilized and many more lives are going to be lost in the future, which it's not a success. So I see it as a good thing. I see it as journalists from, if you want to say right and left, I guess we have some, I have to say that so you understand. But I think journalists as a whole are starting to find their integrity and saying, no, I don't care what side of the aisle I'm on. We need some validity of where this is coming from. Or we need you guys to be responsible for the massive failures that you put out there. And you can't keep claiming it as success because that's propaganda. That's exactly what propaganda is. A government telling you something and you can't question it and you have to believe them because they're the government. Well, no, that's not what we have in the United States. We may have I've served in countries where that is the case. And believe me, guys, we don't want the U.S. to ever be like that at all. So it's admirable to me. I think it is. I don't know. What's your opinion? You follow some of this stuff too, but to my opinion, it's completely admirable. And I think they do need to continue to do this because this is the least transparent government that in my opinion, since I followed it, started following government, worked for the government. This is the least transparent government that we've ever had. And this is a government that continues to push false narratives out there, and we're supposed to be buying it. And it makes us a weaker country, in my opinion. But I'm glad journalists, and like Holly McKay, another one we had on last week, journalists like that are pushing back and saying, nope, this is bullshit. You're telling us lies. Tell us the truth. And if you're not going to, well, then we're going to keep calling you out until you do. And that's tremendous. I love it. I love seeing that.
Yeah, White House press secretary it's a weird job, no matter the administration, because honestly, your job in many ways is to lie on behalf of the administration. Because the fact is you have to sugarcoat everything. You work for the president, so you're never going to go up there and say, we got this wrong or we got that wrong. And during the Bush administration, we had to continually say, we should be in Iraq. There are weapons of mass destruction, all those types of things. And we saw it in the last administration. I could even think of an example when Sean Spicer said there were more people at the inauguration than Obama's inauguration, which we know was not true. And they just have to push whatever narrative the president is going to say. So it's a strange job. You can't really have integrity and have that job, I would say, no matter what. Because think about it, man. We all get things wrong. But if my job is to say that, if you were the president, that everything you got was right, no one.
But that says a lot for how terrible our leadership is. I think great leaders are ones that can admit a failure, and to be successful, you're gonna fail. You're gonna have mistakes, and again, I know you know this. I'm not saying that you don't. You feel the same way as I do. I get where you're coming from, but I think that just says the state of where our government is and where leaders in our country are. That you can't say, you know what? All right, we made a mistake here. Let's learn from it so we don't make it again. That's why we continually make the same mistakes year after year after years, because the arrogance and the incompetence that's continually allowed because they can't say they're wrong. I can't admit that I'm wrong. Why can't you? I'm president of the United States. Okay, you're a person, right? Did you screw up? Yeah, I screwed up. Let's figure out how we don't do this and figure out how we're not going to ever have this happen again. And so if it ever does get in this position that we could possibly have to leave a country again, we do it the correct way so we learn from those failures. But we didn't. That's why you saw the pictures of us, that Chinook in Vietnam, compared to the pictures of the Chinook that was in the State Department compound at the embassy in Kabul. They're exactly the same. We didn't learn from those mistakes. I get what you're saying. I know you feel the same way I do. I just feel like, man, integrity there is no integrity in DC anymore. And
But when you think about it, what president has ever admitted to a fault like in our lifetime? I really can't think of any.
Yeah.
And there's politicians who have, and I've mentioned them on the show before. Like a great one who passed away was Walter Jones, in that he was the guy who was famous for calling French fries freedom fries, and he was very, very gung ho about the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. And then when guys came back to his district losing limbs, he started to change his mind, and he said, I shouldn't have voted for these wars. They were a mistake. And I think that does take courage. But in terms of presidents, I genuinely, I have to look, but I really can't think of an example when either Biden, Trump, Obama, Bush, Clinton, Reagan. Yeah. I can't think of any times that these people have ever said, we got this wrong and we apologize.
Well, and that's why we need to learn from it. And maybe this is the turning point here. Maybe this is where we're meeting the crossroads. Maybe this is where the journalists are saying, no, I'm not believing you. I wish I could have found that. I couldn't find it. The interaction between, it wasn't Jen Psaki, but it was somebody else that was talking about Ukraine and saying we had intel that the Russians are doing a ruse and this and that. And there was, I couldn't find it, brother. Somebody might find it out there, but there was a journalist that was going back and forth with whoever that was out front at the White House spokesman saying, well, where's the verification? Well, we don't have any. Well, then how can we believe it? Because I'm telling you. Well, no, that's not how, and it was kind of funny. It was like for 5 minutes going back and forth, but
it was something from the State Department.
It was. You're right. And I wish I could find it. But to me, seeing that, and I didn't know who this journalist was. I never heard of him before, but seeing that back and forth, it's like, man, finally, there's really some back and forth arguments going on. Not arguments, but some as the journalists asking for validity, asking for verification. We need to find that in DC. I don't think we'd lose faith in a president if they made a mistake and they came on and said, you know what, I screwed up. I made a mistake. Now they wouldn't say I screwed up, but they do it in more a professional way, but say we need to learn from these mistakes. We need to learn what we did wrong, what I did wrong. I made that wrong call so it doesn't happen again. And taking responsibility for their actions. I said even the agency, they couldn't do that when I came back from Libya. I asked behind closed doors. I said, just tell me you're sorry. Nobody even has to know that you're saying you're sorry to me. Just tell me you're sorry for what happened, for you guys not doing what you should have done. They couldn't even do that behind closed doors. So I do think there's a lack of integrity, a lack of courage, a lack of intestinal fortitude, a lack of moral courage, I should say, not just courage, moral courage, because there's a difference between moral courage and physical courage. A lack of moral courage because we allow them to get away literally with murder in most cases, and we don't hold them accountable. So it's nice to see that this is going on, whether it leads to something in the future where there are some changes in integrity in the White House or in DC or the State Department in Roslyn or in Langley or whatever. But at least somebody's trying, and the first step is to try. And it's admirable to see that it's both sides. God, I hate using that. It's admirable to see that it's the left and the right both doing it now, not just one doing it because the one president's in office or the other doing it because the other side's president's in office, that there are groups from both coming in. And I love I love talking to Holly last week about that, because to me that she epitomizes what integrity is, at least in what she reports on, because she doesn't take a side. She just says, this is what's going on, like it or not, this is what's happening. And that's how it should be. It's not.
You also have to keep in mind, and I look, this I would say I would know, not from polls, not from anything I see on the news, just from talking to people of all different political ideologies that I know. And the people on the left generally were not big fans of Joe Biden. I don't know anyone who was like a giant fan of Joe Biden. People who would label themselves leftists, liberals, even socialists, they liked Bernie Sanders. They liked candidates like that. They kind of got stuck with Joe Biden. So I think they're more likely to call him out, as opposed to Republicans. A lot of them, right? Not myself, and I'm a Republican. We're very gung-ho about Trump. So I think it's a little bit easier for journalists on the left to say this guy got something wrong, because they weren't really that enthusiastic. They held their nose and voted for him the same way Republicans felt with John McCain, for example.
I'm sure you're right. I guess I didn't follow it as much as I don't really ever follow a lot of that much as far as who likes who. I do admire and I do trust your opinion, because you do know that more than I do. Not that you're a follower of politics, you're not, but I honestly I agree with you on that, because you do live where you can see that on a daily basis in the Midwest. We really don't see a.
Well, if you think of what people on the left really value and the things they were pushing, it certainly wasn't this. Yeah. It was universal health care. It was a withdrawal of troops, but maybe not in this way. And things like forgiveness of college loans, things that have not happened under Biden. So they're more likely to say we're not happy with it.
And that's another reason why the heck is the government's, if they don't have followers or good supporters from the right or the left, why not try to breach that gap instead of just continually being assholes and literally saying, hey, you're going to believe us or fuck you. We're not, who gives a shit? We're telling you this. If you don't believe us, go eat shit, because we don't have to verify it because we're the U.S. government. You would think if you had any humanity and any integrity at all, I keep using that word integrity because I think it's important, that you would try to reach those people and gain their trust. That's what a good leader would try to do. I'm trying to reach out to y'all and gain your trust by telling you the truth, not just saying, believe this because I'm telling you. That doesn't work. And that's not leadership at all. But I'm whether that's the case or not, when I believe you're right, I do believe you're right. I'm glad that it still is happening. I still am glad that there are left or right, because if you're like me that doesn't follow really as much as I probably should being on a podcast, the intricacies of how left the left is and how right a right is, all I see is I see both sides coming together and finding something common to come together to call out and say, hey, integrity, you got to tell us the truth.
Yeah. But I'll throw it out there this way, and so many people have pointed this out, and to me, this has nothing to do with, how many votes did this one get? It's just because a vote is a vote, whether you're enthusiastic about the vote or not. But how many more Trump signs did you see?
Yeah,
how many more Trump hats did you see? Even here in New York, or where I'm currently at in Connecticut, yeah, you still see a lot of Trump stuff. The voter enthusiasm for Trump was much higher than voter enthusiasm for Biden, as opposed to if they would have had someone like Bernie Sanders up there, people would have been more on board. So I kind of understand why there's a pushback from all sides.
And speaking of all the signs and things, I know this is something you and I don't agree. I still think there was fuckery afoot that went on with the election, because I did see tons of signs, and I was still traveling everywhere. But that's all. We'll get into that. That's a whole nother. We don't want to get into that. Well, another subject. But I'm still glad that it's going on. I'm still glad that I'm happy to see that journalists are pushing back, and I'm happy to see that in America that we can do that, because in other countries, Iraq, Afghanistan, if they even had journalists there anymore, which you really don't speak out about the Taliban, but if you do, be prepared for some definite repercussions, whether it's going to the gulag, going to a prison, or being killed. You can't speak out against governments in other countries, and we still can, and speak out against our own government without any repercussions, except for maybe some social shaming on social media, which, anymore, who gives a shit? I don't pay attention to any of the comments on social media anymore anyway. But here we can still do that. And that's why we still live in the greatest country in the world. And I'm happy to see those like Lester Holt and Jake Tapper. But then I also see the people on the right, the Fox and Friends crew, people still speaking out, but they're speaking out and they're talking about the same thing against what we see now as a government that is, this is the closest thing to a dictatorship I've ever seen in the U.S. government. And maybe I'm wrong, and I haven't followed it much since I didn't really start getting into politics till I started deploying, really. And I didn't even get into it then. I just started to pay attention to it more because it was in the forefront. When you're downrange, I mean, AFN, it's always on. There's always something, and sometimes that's the only thing you have to watch. But I see that maybe this is a good thing. Maybe the lack of transparency in DC and within the FBI and CIA and so forth, and their shenanigans and their fuckery that they're doing right now, maybe that's going to bring people together, and bring groups that had different ideologies, different political ideologies. Maybe they're going to say, okay, well, we need to start coming together and being journalists or being American and being Americans again, not a liberal American or conservative American. We just want to be Americans, and we want our government to represent us and tell us the truth and have our backs, which honestly is a good segue into the truckers. Speaking of a government that doesn't have people's backs, let's talk about the Canadian government.
Yeah, we mentioned the Canadian truckers and the Freedom Convoy last week with Holly McKay, but there's been some updates to it, really. I mean, they were doing what they could to shut down the truckers. As for example, they were making it noise ordinances with making it illegal to honk and things like that. But now they've really taken it to a whole nother level with the freezing of bank accounts under the prime ministership of Justin Trudeau, using the Terrorist Financing Act to target financial support of Canadian truckers' Freedom Convoy. And this is pretty much unprecedented, I would say, to basically equate the Canadian truckers with a terrorist group. And now, look, to be fair, and I always want to give as much to all sides as I can, and to give that devil's advocate. I could also feel for the people in Ottawa who have to live day and night with people honking, with people blocking traffic for others going to work. At the same time, it's like, if you don't have truckers, you have nothing. Yeah. Everything that we have is supplied by truckers. They were definitely the heroes during the pandemic, for sure. And a lot of them take that job because of the freedom that they get, and that they aren't forced by government to do much. And now they're being forced to take a vaccine, and a lot of them are taking a stand. So it's an interesting thing, because how do you find a resolution in all this that, you don't want them blocking traffic, you don't want honking going on day and night. At the same time, it's way overboard to label them a terrorist group. Oh, yeah. And also, they made it so that you couldn't donate on GoFundMe. GoFundMe took that down, which we talked about. And then they started sending Bitcoin. So now they're trying to stop that. And this is pretty, when you talk about like a government dictatorship, this is something we've really never seen before.
And way overstepping. Canadian, the whoever prime minister, I call him, and he is the kindergarten teacher that somehow was in charge of an entire nation. Huge misstep, terrible leadership. And the Canadians, you guys need to make a change. You really do. You need somebody else. But getting away from that, truckers, they're the lifeline of any country. They're the lifeline of America. They're the lifeline of Canada, of course, and they work their asses off. And they are correct. I don't think that you're going to get the mark of the beast if you get the vaccine. I'm not in that category. I don't. But I don't believe ever the government should step in and say, you have to put something in your body. It is a personal choice. And you've heard people say that all the time. I agree with that. I don't think I can say it any better than that. It's up to you and your doctor. If you don't have a doctor, start to adult and go find a doctor. If you still don't, and I didn't in college, I didn't have a primary care till I got into the VA system when I got out of the Army. There still are clinics, and there still are emergency cares that I would go to, that I'd go to if I needed to talk to somebody, and there is a doctor there, and I got to know them. So I guess essentially he was my primary care. If your doctor personally says that you have to get a vaccine, okay, get it. If he says you don't, he or she says you don't, then you don't. Never should the government step in and say, you got to vaccinate. You got to put something in your body. You have to do something medically. It's a personal choice, and everybody's different. And you and I are a perfect example where we both have had, I think I had COVID. I'm sure I did. I didn't go I was sick. I wasn't going to go get checked. Oh, I definitely have it. But you did have it, and we had different effects because we're different people. I'm a little older. You're a little younger, and you obviously more virile than I am.
And to be fair, full disclosure, I also was vaccinated.
And that's it's not that we've listened to the government and said, hey, we need to get vaccinated. I talked to my doctor when I got sick, and he says, do I need to get vaccinated? So, well, it seems like you already had it. And he said,
Oh yeah, while you're
Why?
sick,
Yeah,
right.
yeah. So I was like, what? But I also, even before that, my primary care here in Joplin, he said, he did tell me, he goes, no, he says, I've been vaccinated. He goes, there's nothing wrong with it. This is what my doctor said to me. I said, well, should I get it because I'm 50? He goes, if you're not going to a state or a place that requires it, you don't need to get it. That was his exact words to me. And I believe that. He is a doctor. He is not a politician in DC. He is somebody that deals.
If the government is listening, they're gonna.
I know they're gonna, and he works for the VA system, so you're gonna have to come after the whole VA system, their government. So, which is a government arm too. Isn't that ironic? But guys, this is how it should have been done. And if it should have been done this way from the beginning, I honestly think there would be no issue with vaccinations right now. Most people would have probably been vaccinated because their doctors would have told them to, and it would have been taken out of government hands. Something like this should never be used for political purposes, and it was. And now it just caught fire, and now it's way out of control. It was like they were trying to, control burn areas so there's not a forest fire down the line, and they let it go out of control, and here we are. I side with the truckers. I don't have any issues with the vaccinations. I think now majority of them are probably safe. I still say probably because you'll never know. 20 years from now, if I have a dick growing out of my forehead, you can tell me I was wrong. Okay, but I also don't agree that there ever should be a mandate by the U.S. government. This is
Or the Canadian
by the Canadian government. I'm sorry, and the U.S. government could definitely help this by stepping in. And because believe me, I don't think for a second that we don't have a ton of influence in Canada. And we do, and coming in and saying, hey, you guys need to knock this off. And my opinion, the way it ends is Trudeau, stops being a controlling little freak and says, hey, all right, we are not going to mandate this anymore. This is going to be a personal decision between the truckers and their doctors and their medical care professionals, which how it should have always been. That would be my.
But and also the interesting part with that I should throw in there is this plays into also the fact of Canadian. You said this earlier, Canadian.
I know.
And now I said Canadian. Canadians, Canada having a national healthcare system and us not. So there's a little bit of difference in there too. Under what you can do under a national healthcare system and what you can't do under a privatized system. That's probably more for the lawyers than myself, but that also probably plays into it a little.
Well, maybe when this is all said and done, they'll look at that and they'll see, again, this is what good leaders do. Let's look and see what happened. Is the universal healthcare system still good, or do we need to restructure this in a way if this ever happens again? Or in the U.S., we look at Canada and go, okay, is that universal healthcare system in a situation like this better than what we have from the private side? We're not going to get into that on this show, guys.
Yeah, I think both have major faults. We need to find something that's very different than probably what we have now and what's in Canada.
And
I think there probably has to be some element of universal healthcare. I personally think this is just me, and probably some element of privatized healthcare. I know a lot of people are going to disagree with that. I think that there needs to be something of that effect, because what we have now with kids having to raise money for cancer treatments if they don't have the right healthcare is horrible.
And without me doing more research, I don't want to get into that now. Sure. I always put my foot in my mouth anyway when I do research. So let me do some research. But
Sure.
But that is something again where we can always look for these things as opportunities to get better, to learn from a mistake or to learn from something that may not be working. But we don't do that. And when I say we, the governments don't do that because they always have to be right. I'm right. I'm always right. Fuck you. I'm right. No, you're not. Let's figure this out. Let's see what is going good and what doesn't go well. And let's go as well and doesn't go well. Let's pick what goes well. The Ranger Battalion taught me that. Ranger Battalion, we really invented nothing on our own. If you go to the 75th Ranger Regiment, everything that we do, we have pulled from other units that was the best out of those units for us. That is where I learned that. There's the Rangers. We don't make anything for ourselves. We just go and get trained by everybody else and say, hey, that is awesome. Let's do that. That is awesome. Let's do that. You know what? That's not really working. We don't want that. It's the same way we should do with everything, especially the government and especially with healthcare and especially in something like this. But no, we have to have so much ego, so much arrogance that we can't take a step back and go, all right, you know what? I'm wrong here. You're right. Let's do that instead. Like we do on the Battleline podcast where me and Ian have our differences, but then in the end, it's like, you know what? That was right. Ian, let's go that way. You know, right, Tano? You know what, Tano? That was correct. Let's go this way. And it just makes a better organization. And then honestly, everybody's on the same page and it takes the ego out of it. And but truckers, going back to the truckers, guys, I stand with you. I'm not against the vaccine, but I am against government mandates. And there's no way in hell a government should tell you what you should be able to put in your body. But if you feel like getting the vaccine,
question for you though, right? Because I stand with the truckers as well. However, do you think that the most effective way of getting their message across, and maybe it's because they feel that they can't get their message across any other way, is blocking off traffic, honking day and night in Ottawa, and really it's changing business. I don't know, because when you just have a peaceful protest, sometimes your message gets completely lost and you have to do something a little bit more extreme. And look, they're not burning down neighborhoods, they're not being violent. However, I could understand how it's a nuisance for the people.
I think truckers are smart enough to know that again, countries rely on them. Just like the farmers could strike and say, hey, we're not giving you any more food if they ever mandated farmers to get vaccines too. But luckily, farmers don't fall underneath those categories. I think this is the way that they can get their point across, because I do believe they wanted to make a scene. Let's make this an issue. This is going to be a huge issue because we're going to be out blocking traffic. We're not getting our goods and services to people. They need it. So I wouldn't know. You know what? I don't know a better way to do it if I was a trucker, but I'm not a trucker either. So I don't know what other options are out there. But looking at it from their point of view, trying to, I think it is, because you are making a spectacle, which they wanted to do. You're right. They're not burning buildings. They're not destroying businesses. They're not tipping over cars. They're not doing anything destructive. They're being a nuisance, which is something they want to do because that's going to speed up people to complain to the government, which is going to make them want to make remedy this. But and they're stopping goods and services coming in. So they're seeing that the government is saying, wait a second, we can't take these guys lightly. Our lifeblood relies on these people. Our survival relies on these truckers. So, I guess if you and I sat down, I bet you and I could probably think of something, but just off the cuff, if you ask me that question, I don't think there is a better way at this point in time. And I think they did what they had to do. And I think they're getting their point across. And they're also this forcing the Canadian people, whether this was intended to or not, brother, it's forcing the Canadian people to see the true colors of their current government, that they are willing to take egregious. I'll pull that from Ricky Bobby there, Talladega Nights. Egregious steps to stop this. Claiming they're terrorists? Are you kidding me? Suspending their bank accounts? You motherfucker. Are you kidding me? Canada, I did it too. Damn it, Canada. Canada, you need to make a change. If anything comes out of this, you need to make a change and get new leadership, because your leadership is, my opinion, from the U.S. looking in with this scenario here, my opinion, and you guys, a lot of people have already said, Tano, go fuck yourself. I don't want to listen to you. That's fine. My opinion is you need to make a change in your leadership, because it's failing you. But like I said, what's the positives out of this? Well, let's find out what we can do better. Let's no more mandates that shouldn't be put up there. Let's see if our healthcare systems, what works better now. We can test these things. But then you added something as well from Congressman Crenshaw, who you and I both, we have our misgivings about him. I don't really care for him, but you did say he gave a great valid option, and I don't know if you want to talk about that. I think it's a great option.
He put out there, he was saying to Canadian truckers that we currently have this work visa program, and at the same time the U.S. has a current trucker shortage. So he's saying you could use that to your advantage and come over here, and we'd like to welcome in those truckers. It's kind of similar to what Ron DeSantis did with police officers in New York and elsewhere that had this same situation. You said, hey, come over here and we'll give you a bonus. So I think that is a viable solution. If someone really needs to maintain their life, they need to have this job, but they're really, for whatever reason, they personally don't want to get this vaccine. This could be a really viable option to come here to the U.S.
And I think you still are probably going to get your point across, because now Canada is going to have a shortage of truckers. So the goods and services still aren't going to be getting there, and you're not not backlogging traffic, and in the grand scheme of things, backlogging traffic is minor to me. But if it was me in that neighborhood, yeah, I'd be pretty pissed. I'd be like, damn it, guys. But I would also be putting pressure on.
Imagine us recording Battleline Podcast and all you heard was honking.
But
it'd be driving us nuts.
But yeah, it's minor in the grand scheme of things, of where I've seen protests completely go awry, where there has been deaths. But I think it's a great. At least someone is trying to find a positive option out of this. For at least the United States, it's a positive option, and for the truckers, I feel it's a positive option. But maybe there's more into it that we just don't know about, regulations and so forth. That if they came, I don't know. Would they take a pay cut? Would they not get as much work? Are they going to have to fall under more stipulations because they're Canadian and not American citizens? But at face value, it looks like a great option, an option for them if they don't want to do it. Hey, come work for us, and we could use more truckers and more people getting out there and getting our goods and services to us. It makes our economy and our country stronger. We're able to have all those things out there to us. It makes us a stronger country, and people can get. We got food on the shelves and creature comforts, and everybody's happier. Don't think for a second that it doesn't make us a stronger country. Being happy makes you stronger than being miserable. It does, and it gives them an option to continue to work and provide for their families.
Yeah, and you know what else this reminded me of? I dug up an old clip of when Alex Jones was on the show, because he talked about how he had the same situation years before this at this point, where he couldn't open a bank account. He's like, despite having great credit, despite having no issues in the past with me not paying bills or anything like that, there's banks who were saying, we will not, open a bank account.
A lot of people rolled their eyes at that too. They didn't believe it.
Yeah, and he even kind of said, like, I am a test run for this. He's like, I realized to these people, who see me in the media, he said something where he was like, I'm Satan, dude, something like that. But it's true. I think a lot of people are like, Alex Jones, whatever, he's a nut job. That's how some people see him. But when you do this now to an entire group of truckers who probably are the most important occupation at a time like this, where we need, for all goods and services, we need those guys. I think a lot more mainstream Canadians and Americans are going to say, hey, this is not okay.
And labeling them as terrorists, I guarantee you, with the Unabomber and the bombs that we see going off overseas with truck bombs and things, these guys have been vetted. I think they're as far as the only people that would be considered the least amount of being a terrorist, or the less likely to be a terrorist, would be U.S. service members. These guys are vetted. I mean, can you imagine if they didn't vet a lot of these truckers, because how easy it would be to roll into a city and blow up your truck with your car guy. I don't know how they even get away with calling these guys terrorists. How is it? I guess I'm asking you that question, because I don't know under what context could you say these people you say these truckers, these hardworking people, probably some of the most patriotic people within the respective countries are. How could you call them terrorists and get away with it, and then be able to pull their bank accounts? That's criminal. To me, that's criminal by the Canadian government. That is. Somebody should be thrown in prison for that shit. That's just, that's unbelievable to me. I don't know, brother. I don't know what pretext you could call a trucker a terrorist at all. These guys are probably least likely to be terrorists. If it was so easy to be a trucker and to not be vetted, believe me, we would have saw a truck bomb somewhere in Canada. Damn it, in Canada, or the United States. Since the Unabomber, when was that? And that was a rental vehicle, but when was that? 20, 30 years ago.
Are you thinking of, unless I'm getting it wrong, because I mean, Tim McVeigh used a truck, but did the Unabomber do that? Wasn't he part of that whole, or McVeigh was McVeigh? And this is why we have Ian, because I get shit like this wrong all the time. I just think the Unabomber was sending packages in the mail. If I remember correctly,
an inspiration to McVeigh? That maybe I'm tying the two together, and I shouldn't be.
No, the inspiration, because I'll be honest, I know less about the Unabomber. I know he was a professor at UC Berkeley. Genuinely, and I'm not saying this is a positive about him. I'm just saying it, as a matter of fact, brilliant guy. Regardless of what he did. Oh. But Tim McVeigh, his acts were really inspired more so actually by what happened at what's it called? The Waco. What happened at Waco, Texas,
David Koresh. You're right.
With David Koresh. And the thing is, he felt it was an overreach of government. And the interesting thing about McVeigh, who was a veteran, is that if you look at what he believed and stuff, look, there's what he did, completely no defense for, of course. But one interesting thing is he did not know there were children in those buildings. His what he wanted to do was honestly kill government employees, government agents. He did not mean to kill children. However, that's no excuse because he did.
And that's children. If you're going to have a bomb of that size, the residual damage is collateral damage, I should say. And again, see, I'm wrong.
But not a trucker though.
Not a trucker. And this is why we have Ian on this show, because I was wrong. I messed it up. See how easy it is, government officials? See how easy it is to say, I was wrong. Ian got it right. Now and we can move on from that. But you're spot on. And that's what I'm saying. I just don't get by what definition does the Canadians, because the Canadians have to call these guys terrorists and to do this to them, aside from just being control asshole freaks that want to mandate vaccines because you're just a little man, Trudeau. I'm sorry to say, bro. It's criminal to me, taking work away from these guys and these men and women that are truckers on the road that are, again, they are the lifeline. They supply countries and keep countries moving. They're one of the mainstays that work their asses off, are away from their families a lot, and sacrifice a lot of their lives to make sure our country and to make sure of Canada, to make sure that we have food on our shelves and have the creature comforts. And here you go, treating them like shit. So it's terrible.
I fully agree. But now I wanted to make sure I have all my facts correct on the Unabomber.
Yeah, because I know. I probably screwed it up. I screwed it up, I'm sure.
I wanted to make sure I had this right. The interesting thing about the guy, youngest professor ever hired by UC Berkeley. And the way that I know that, believe it or not, is there's a song by Ill Bill, the rapper, about the Unabomber, and it's like a biography on the Unabomber. It's a great song. I didn't know much about the Unabomber until I listened to that song.
That's when rap was good, dude. That's when rap.
Well, it's not that long ago.
Come on. How long ago was it?
Let me see. Ill Bill, Exploding Octopus. Guys, check out that song if you've never heard it. It's a great like historical, song about, just an important.
You're right. You're right. It's not
positive or negative, but 2013.
Oh, I guess well, still, it's 9 years ago. It's not. Yeah, it's still not as good as the '90s rap and early 2000s. I wouldn't still compare him to Bushwick Bill back from the old. Who died a couple years ago. Boy, those guys, man. Then him, Scarface, and Willie D. Those guys. That's some rappers right there. That's back when rap was good. That was a Texas rap, man. Those guys were from Houston, and they were. Man,
but do they have a song about the?
No, they don't. See, we're getting off subject. See, here I am. I'm like a cat chasing a light. I'm just all over the place.
It's me too. I'm off subject here. I mean, we got to get to Tom Young, but I don't know if you had anything else you wanted to say. I know you were saying as well, like the Joe Rogan stuff you wanted to talk about. I don't know if you want to get into it.
I'm not a fan of Joe Rogan. I never have been. But here's the government trying to control what gets out there. And you have somebody that has more listeners than all the major media combined. And here you go, the government saying, hey, not so many words, but in so many words, hey, Spotify needs to censor and get control of more of, and they may not have said censor, but that's what they meant. Everybody that has half a brain knows that.
No, they need to start
policing. It's the same thing. Yeah. Come on, guys. Tomato. Tomato's a tomato, it's tomato, whatever you say. But there it is again. Control. How do you control a country? And this is how all of them do. Dictators or countries like the Taliban that have countries like Afghanistan and now the Taliban control. You You control that narrative. And luckily for us, you and I have been preaching this forever. This is why podcasts, when we started saying this a year ago, are so important, because they cannot police that narrative. They still kind of are. How many you told me they pulled? I didn't even know this. They pulled 100 shows of his, or
they pulled a lot. But the thing is, I think a lot of it is Joe doing it to himself, and also the fact that Joe, I think, made a mistake in signing to Spotify. But when you sign $100 million deal, you're going to compromise on something.
You have to do.
You're just going to cave. And we talked about it with Adam Kokesh long before the current controversy, because Adam was on with Rogan and they deleted Adam's episode. And hey, because I know this is the current controversy. No one said the N-word. No one used any racial language. Adam is just, and we've had him on the show. Adam's just a controversial guest. Adam is a guy who would label himself anti-government. Adam is a guy who's anarcho-capitalist. And yeah, he's controversial. He's also a Marine veteran, but he has a voice, and like we were happy to have him on.
It was awesome. Yeah, it was awesome. What? As I dug a little bit more into this, because I just didn't know a lot of what was going on aside from just the headline see Joe Rogan. It made no sense to me, because the people that he had on that were disagreeing with the vaccine, these guys are reputable people. It wasn't like he pulled somebody off the street that didn't. It was people in those fields that know, they're doctors and scientists that are in those fields.
Yeah, this is the thing that I think people who have never listened to the show get wrong. They seem to think that Joe Rogan's show is just Joe Rogan, like literally just going, "Don't get the vaccine." It's because I told you so, and that's not what the show is. Like, I know the episodes that were controversial was Peter McCullough, who I think wrote like the most peer-reviewed studies on the subject. And then he had Dr. Robert Moses on, who look, I think a little bit of inflation in his biography personally, and I don't know, but when he says he's the sole inventor of mRNA technology, I think that's a little bit inflated. I don't think anybody is the sole inventor of anything like that. I think it takes, it
takes a team, dude.
You've seen it in your own profession. I think people take credit for too much sometimes. Not to even take a shot at him because I like the guy, but I think like the same way people hated the fact that when Rob O'Neill came out, he said, I shot Bin Laden, not the team shot Bin Laden.
That's what I was going to say. So yeah, it's kind of like Rob O'Neill saying whether he said it or not, it was interpreted this way, that he killed Bin Laden. No, there was actually a whole team that did that, Rob. And I'm not going to knock, because I'm sure Rob.
No, and I like the guy. I personally like him. I talk to him, but I understand the controversy there, and that's why the same thing with Dr. Robert Moses. Look, he's a reputable guy. I also think there might be some financial incentive when he goes on the show and he says, "Get on Getter, Joe," and then he went on Michael Savage and he promoted the social media site Getter a bunch of times. So I take everything with a grain of salt. However, he's still a reputable doctor, works in the field. And he knows what he's talking about. As you said, he's not bringing on random people to talk about this. And he
did bring on dissenting opinion. He brought on the Gupta, the guy from
Sanjay Gupta, and he outdebated.
He did, and he got Gupta to admit that what was the help me out with the
that ivermectin is not horse.
Exactly. So and you know what, and to be threatened by musicians from the 60s that, come on, like guys, let's be honest, they have probably injected everything and anything into their bodies over the years with what's his
Neil Young. However, could I
give
you a little bit?
Go ahead. Man.
I don't know if you know the full backstory, and
I don't.
I wasn't prepared to talk about this. So I believe Neil Young got polio or something like that as a kid, as a result of, not having a vaccine at the time. So I think because of his own personal experience, he is extremely pro-vaccine. And I understand that as well.
But that's polio. That's not what we have now. And saying, I'm going to pull my stuff because these reputable doctors and scientists are saying that, hey, man, the vaccine doesn't work, which we all know now that it's not going to stop you from getting COVID. Everybody knows that, and their mom knows that. That was too far. Don't use that experience to really your polio experience. Which, hey, okay, you had it, you didn't get the vaccine. Okay, sorry, man.
Yeah, well, no, it's not that so I pulled it up. At least this is the first thing I pulled up on here. So hopefully it's reputable. But it says, Young suffered from polio in 1952 during the last major outbreak of the disease in Ontario when he was 5 years old. There was no vaccine at the time. He underwent a lumbar puncture that, as he says, hurt like hell and scared me to death before revealing the moment his doctor confirmed he had contracted polio. So here's the thing. I agree with what you're saying. These are two different vaccines. At the same point, just, understanding from his perspective, and I don't think Joe Rogan should be the enemy for this, but I think in his perspective, hey, I had to overcome a lot through polio, and had there been a vaccine at the time, maybe I wouldn't have had to experience this. So he's saying, hey, go out and get the vaccine, and I don't want people discouraging that. So
but did he just do it to that level, or did he take it to the extreme of, I'm going to pull all my music on here because this son of a bitch is telling everybody to not get vaccines, instead of, you know what, if he would have just, again, here it comes down to the extremes. If he just would have said just what you said, okay, I get where he's coming from. That makes sense. All right, but going, that son of a bitch is telling everybody not to get vaccines. He's the devil. Now everybody's going to die of COVID because nobody's getting vaccines. And maybe he didn't say that. Maybe he was just embellished that way by, again, the media. It's where we could have stopped it in the get-go if it just would have been, why are you saying this, Mr. Neil Young, that have done a ton of drugs in your life? No, I'm sorry. I went too far in that one. I shouldn't. Okay. But anyway.
Has he? No, I honestly don't know.
I guess that's just the 60s stereotype and singers from back 60s and 70s.
Yeah, I'm not going to, because I just don't know if he did or not.
You know what? Maybe he didn't. Now, I will put that he didn't. Let's just say he didn't. But regardless, coming out and just saying, this is why I feel this way, works a lot better than saying, I'm going to pull all my stuff from Spotify because Joe Rogan is saying that people don't need vaccines. No, you're controlling a narrative again. Tell the people why. People will understand. A person is not dumb. When people get together in groups and we get this group think, that's when we become dumb. And in this case, it's a group think coming together of those that want to control a narrative, still push a vaccine to maintain control of people, obviously, instead of just coming out and saying, this is why I feel this way. And then a person can listen to that. And I understand, okay, you know what, Neil, I get it. This is why you said it. I understand it. I still don't agree with you and thinking the vaccine needs to be for everybody, but I understand your feelings now. Okay, I got it. It's just like if somebody said, hey, there's a cure for ulcerative colitis. If I would have got a vaccine back in and I didn't, maybe I would feel different. Granted, there's still no cure for ulcerative colitis or Crohn's disease, so that's not going to happen. But I be having an affliction that damn near killed me and dude, made me for a year of my life feel like I was going to not be able to get out of bed ever again. I get the sickness aspect of it, but you got to do it in such a way. And I don't know, did he say that? And did the media just run with it? Maybe he did say that and the media just went took off with it.
I could give you a little bit more background, but while you were talking, I did want to see, just because I always want to get things accurate or not. I had no idea if Young had any background in drugs or not. So here's what I found. This is what it says. And this is from Far Out.
And also remember there was also Janis Joplin as well, was the other one. I think that I heard.
But she's dead. She can't.
No, who was it? Then who was it? There was another one.
Oh, you're talking about now I have to find Janis Joplin.
She's dead. Okay, well that's why I was like, yeah. Well, maybe she came.
But it says in a 1988 interview with Rolling Stone, Young said about dispelling this myth once and for all. Asked his thoughts on drugs with regards to his druggy image. Young responded, "That's a myth. I mean, how would I have kept this together for so long if I was on drugs? It'd be impossible. You could not do what I have done if you were into drugs. I mean, I used a few drugs. I smoked a lot of grass in the 60s, continued to smoke grass in the 70s, and dabbled around in other drugs, but I never got hooked on, never got out of hand with the harder drugs. I experimented, but I think I'm basically a survivor. I've never been an alcoholic, never used heroin." So I just don't want to put that out there, if that's his take on it.
That is the beauty of the Battleline Podcast, is we do these things actually in front of you on the show, so you can either roll your eyes at me or Ian, but at least one of us is going to get the facts out there and the truth. It's most of the time it's Ian because he's a great researcher. I'm just lazy. Well, so I'll let it out.
I mean, look, it's a quick Google search, but the two things that I'll point out there that's kind of interesting when you're talking about the pulling your music from Spotify, Neil Young, just like so many artists in the past year or two, sold the rights to most of his catalog, or at least maybe half of his catalog, to a third party. So he doesn't even have the rights to his whole catalog, and he had to ask on this guy's behalf. And these people like Crosby and Nash, the other members, are saying, "Oh, I'm going to pull my music," and it's like, not so fast. You already sold your music, and once you sell the rights to your music, the owner could put the music wherever they want. So the second thing I was going to mention that's been the big news in the past couple of days is quietly, from what I'm seeing, hopefully this is accurate, Neil Young's music is back on Spotify.
Oh,
throughout all that.
It all comes down to the mighty dollar, man. Come on, really, are you going to get rid of Joe Rogan? And how many? I heard it on the rate when I was driving. 11 million he has listeners to his show, or something.
I don't know,
something like that.
Around.
Are you really going to pull that guy? I mean, he is. I'm not a fan of Joe Rogan. Guys, you guys all listen to Battleline Podcast. You know, I say it all the time. I don't have any ill will against him. I think he does a good job. I just, it's just not a fan. It's not my cup of tea. But that many listeners, Spotify really going to get rid of Joe Rogan? No. And I believe he could have probably done more to stand up and say, hey, you know what? Just like we said, hey, I didn't put anything else out there that wasn't from a subject matter expert in that field. I didn't ask Alec Jones to talk to me about the vaccine and the intricacies of why it's not effective. Granted, I'm sure Alex has his own opinion on that, which you obviously, but he put the subject matter experts, and he also does get dissenting opinions. From what I saw, he does get people from all sides of the aisle. And from what I understand, help me out, Ian, and I don't know, maybe we'll Google this as well. He's not a conservative at all.
No. He voted for Bernie Sanders in the primary, or he said he was going to support him in the general election if he got nominated. So he is a believer in like national health care. He's a believer in universal basic income. I don't think he's a liberal either, though. I think someone like me. I mean, I really don't use those labels anymore for myself because it depends on what issue we're talking about.
He's just a free thinker, a person that believes in what he believes in. And to me, whether I like his show or not, that's admirable. That was always admirable for somebody but in this case here, I do feel like he could have stuck to his guns even more because he is that power, whether he realizes it or not, he is that powerful in the media industry. He's huge, probably one of the most powerful.
Which is why I think he could have remained independent and still made tens of millions of dollars instead of $100
Well, maybe we need to start our own podcast line and get his ass over to us, dude.
It'll be that easy.
but that being said, again, what we're going back to, it's great. This is why we, on a positive side, to end on a positive, at least on my end, that's why podcasts are so important. That's why having independent podcasts are so important, is because you're not allowing the government, which we see every day now, wants to control the narrative, because when you control the narrative and it turns into propaganda, you control the people. This doesn't allow that to happen. And that is why podcasts, whether you're a Joe Rogan or you're a Battleline Podcast, you're doing your part, making sure that the narrative can't be controlled by the U.S. government, and you can, and we're really validating why this country is so great, because of freedom of speech, and why the First Amendment is so fantastic, and why the Constitution is so fantastic, and why this country is the greatest country still. Don't care what you people say, it's still the greatest country in the world to live in because of these freedoms that we have, man. So I want to end up on a positive with all this, because I do think there's a positive silver lining out of all this that's going on, that if you took a step back, you can see it transforming that way. If you can remain positive and learn from the mistakes that we're making and turning into something that makes us stronger, which I do think that we're going that route. We just got to keep going that route, and it's going to take some hiccups and some stumbles and some falls. But when you fall down, what do you do, son? That's what my dad used to tell me. What do you do when you fall off that horse, son? Well, you get back on, you keep riding. You learn what you did wrong and why you fell off, and then you get back on, you don't do it again. So you don't fall off again. This is what we're doing. And I do see it happening in a positive way, but it's going to take some bumps.
I know you're a movie guy. You've seen Zoolander.
I love Zoolander. I love Zoolander. Am I missing something? What do you say?
I'm thinking of, remember the part where Maury says to Derek, he's like, what do we do when we fall off the horse? And then long pause. We get back on the horse. And then remember Derek, he's like, sorry, I'm not a gymnast, Maury.
Oh, Maury, his dad, Jerry Stiller, said that. That's right.
Yeah.
I love Zoolander, dude. That's kind of my mentality right there too. What is this, a school for ants? It's also a Zoolander. Dude, Ben Stiller, awesome. Still love all his stuff. I just watched the Royal Tenenbaums. I love Wes Anderson movies. I think Wes Anderson movies are outstanding. The only guy that makes better movies is Guy Ritchie. Guy Ritchie and Wes Anderson, completely different genre movies. Two of my favorite directors. And Ben Stiller was in Royal Tenenbaums, and he was awesome in that again. He just is so funny, and I don't know how he's funny, but he just is. And that Zoolander's, yeah, come on, man. I can't turn left. It can't turn left, or he can only turn one of the greatest movies ever. If you ever feel down, go watch either Starsky and Hutch or Zoolander with those two, with Owen Wilson and Ben Stiller, guys, because you're right. Zoolander replicates life as best that it can in a funny way. It is, love it. Zoolander, or go watch the Adam Sandler movie where he's the Mossad agent.
Oh yeah, the Don't Mess
with the Sun.
Was that the right one? Yeah.
Don't Mess with another terrible movie, but so terrible it's funny. It's hilarious. So yeah, awesome. You made me smile, brother. I can see Zoolander. I love Blue Steel. Always gonna have Blue Steel. We got to do another video with you and I doing Blue Steel one of these days. Maybe we'll do it. Okay. We'll do an Instagram post here, or what's that?
We'll do an Instagram live.
Okay, I'm talking too much. You're getting me spun up. All right.
No. We're good. So before we get to Tom Young, I was actually speaking with Ryan Duvier over at Fort Scott Munitions, and he sent me some info. So I'm going to have to figure out exactly how we're going to promote this. So I'm just going to say that as of right now, there's going to be an event May 6th and 7th that's going to basically be the Fort Scott training facility in conjunction with Battleline Tactical.
Yeah,
and I'm really excited.
I hope you get to come, man. They're going to call it Fort Defense, and it's going to be Battaline's home training area here in Fort Scott, Kansas. And I can call it it's going to be the Golden Ticket course. So basically what we're going to do, and what Ryan's tremendous, wonderful, wonderful person. You'll meet him if you ever get down to any of these training events, is just like Willy Wonka. I'm a big goof, and I love Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, and so does Ryan. Ryan is a bigger goof than I am. And it was, well, let's do that. Let's do a golden ticket where if you buy a case of ammo, there's going to be 15 golden tickets put in these cases of ammo. And if you get one, well, you get to come to the course for free and at the cost of Battleline and Fort Scott Munitions. Primarily Fort Scott Munitions. They're the brains behind the operations. I just show up and try to train. But I think it's cool. I think it's going to be something that's really, really neat to do. And it was a great idea, and I can't take any credit for it. It's Ryan Duvier's idea. Tremendous. So once they start promoting it, guys, just start paying attention. Get on the Fort Scott Munitions website and sign up for emails, and you'll be the first ones to start to see when they're going to start actually putting the golden tickets in the cases and what ammo cases, what calibers they'll put it in. So, definitely go to Fort Scott Munitions and get on their email list so you can be the first ones to see what will be when it's going to be available to start buying, and you're going to be able to win that golden ticket.
Yeah, I know the ticket sales are going to start on March
1st.
So we'll hash things out on here to give you some more info, but there's going to be a ton of people there, including Guns Out TV, Hank Strange, Jesse Fenley, and more to come. A bunch of participating sponsors, Daniel Defense, E3 Camping, Gun Owners of America, GOA, Tactical Shit. So yeah, check it out, guys. And just go to, also, if you want to check out their merch, as always, fortscottmunitions.com, and you'll get 15% off when you use the promo code Battleline. You could also go to the dealer locator there, and you could find a dealer for Fort Scott Munitions by you. Fort Scott Munitions is a proud supporter of Chris Peranto, Battleline Tactical, and Battleline Podcast. Also, one of our great sponsors, of course, is Bub's Naturals. They're one of a kind when it comes to collagen protein because they're single sourced, and also the fact there's no blending. It's just grass-fed cowhide. That's the one ingredient, and they have the element of giving back. They give back 10% on all of their products to the Glenn Doherty Memorial Foundation, which, as we're seeing, is helping military members and family members of military members, special operations veterans in particular, attend college and higher education. So they're doing great things.
And the product is outstanding. You and I stand by it, and we've been with them. You help me with my time, brother. You're my, I can't pay attention to time for shit, but been using the product for over a year. And God, yeah. It definitely makes a difference in your lifestyle. Healthy lifestyle makes you it's strong. It does. It's got the protein in there, so you're building muscle mass, but you're building lean muscle mass because it's that collagen protein. My skin's better, my hair's better, my fingernails grow. Guys, it's outstanding stuff. If you're going to use any kind of protein at all, I would highly recommend Bubs Naturals over anything out there, and especially if you're just sticking with collagen, it's the best collagen protein out there, and it dissolves well in all the hot drinks. Coffee, it's in my coffee right now, and it's fantastic stuff. So Bubs Naturals, best collagen protein, best protein in my opinion on the market today, and like you said, supporting the GDMF Foundation, Glenn Doherty Memorial Foundation. Their hearts are in the right place too. Massive amount of integrity, tremendous product. Enough said.
Check them out, guys. BubsNaturals.com, promo code Battleline, and you're going to receive 20% off. Once again, BubsNaturals.com, promo code Battleline. So joining us for the first time on Battleline Podcast is Tom Young, West Virginia Air National Guard vet with over 20 years of service, retiring in 2013. Young served in Iraq and Afghanistan and flew combat missions to Bosnia and Kosovo. And he's the author of various books, both fiction and nonfiction. And the latest book, which I'm holding, is Red Burning Sky. It's got a great quote on the cover from Vince Flynn, one of the most exciting new thriller talents in years. And this is available now on Kensington Books. It's historical fiction based on the World War II aviation true story of Operation Halyard. And with that, it's an honor to have you on, sir.
Well, thanks so much. It's an honor to get to talk to you gentlemen and your audience. I certainly appreciate that. And as you mentioned, my new novel, Red Burning Sky, is inspired by a real-life event from World War II, Operation Halyard, which was the rescue of more than 500 downed Allied flyers, mainly American flyers, in Yugoslavia in 1944. And it's one of the lesser-known corners of World War II history. In fact, I often refer to it as the greatest military rescue you've never heard of. And I find that even a lot of World War II buffs have not heard of this one. And there's some reasons why you may not have heard of it, and we can get into that in a little bit. But perhaps the first question that might come to a listener's mind is, wait a minute, what were 500 downed American flyers doing on the ground in Yugoslavia to begin with? How did that happen? Well, the answer to that has everything to do with the target they were trying to hit. These were mainly bomber crews, mainly crews of B-17 Flying Fortresses and B-24 Liberators. And they had been sent to hit the German-run oil refineries at Ploiești, Romania. World War II was the first truly mechanized war, and that's why the Allied command took the decision that one of the best ways to stop Hitler's mechanized army would be to try to starve it of fuel. So these refineries became a high priority target, and for obvious reasons, they became a heavily defended target. The Germans defended these targets, these refineries, ferociously with anti-aircraft artillery and smoke screens over the refineries and fighter aircraft around the refineries. And over time, a lot of bombers went down. And I do mean over time. This wasn't just one big raid. There was a large initial raid, but then raids continued for months after that. The bombers would damage the refineries. The Germans would make repairs and put them back online. The bombers would come back. And over these months, a lot of aircraft went down. The bombers' egress and ingress routes to and from the target took them over Yugoslavia. And to be more specific, the routes took them over a region of Serbia called Ravna Gora. And that's where a lot of the crew members of these stricken aircraft bailed out. And when they did so, they found themselves parachuting into a very complicated situation on the ground. At that time in Yugoslavia, you had a civil war in the middle of a world war. You had two main guerrilla factions. You had the non-communist royalist Chetniks led by General Draza Mihailovich. And then you had the communist-leaning partisans led by Tito and favored by the Soviet Union. And when these two groups were not fighting Germans, they were fighting each other. And of course, history tells us that eventually the partisans won and Tito formed a communist government in Yugoslavia. But to get back to World War II, both of these sides helped shelter American airmen. But it was mainly the Chetnik side that was instrumental in making Operation Halyard a success. And these guerrillas and the villagers who supported them were very brave and very generous in their support of our airmen. Very brave in that, they hid them in barns and stables and haylofts and attics and anywhere they could put them. And you can imagine what would have happened to a farm family if the SS or the Gestapo had caught them sheltering Allied flyers. And they were also generous because it's important to remember these folks were poor to begin with. And now they have all these extra mouths to feed, literally falling out of the sky. But still, they did whatever they could for our airmen. But over time, as the numbers of downed airmen grew into the hundreds, the situation just became unsustainable. It was just a matter of time before the Germans were going to catch on and sweep through that area. And if that had happened, if they had come through probing every haystack with bayonets, the flyers would have become POWs and the people who supported them would have become dead. So something had to change. So the forerunner of the CIA, the U.S. Office of Strategic Services, came up with a plan to parachute agents into Ravna Gora, to have them coordinate an effort to have the flyers and the villagers build dirt airstrips by hand so that C-47s, military version of the DC-3, could come in and land in German-occupied territory and pick these guys up and fly them out to Italy. And as impossible as that sounds, they did it. They pulled it off. The whole thing was a stunning success.
What led you to wanting to write Red Burning Sky? Because I'd never heard of this before, and I'm a war buff. Especially World War II, Vietnam War. Those are the things that led me to join the Army Rangers. Was reading about Colonel Darby or reading about the Rangers in Vietnam, and through all those, of course, my grandfather on my dad's side was a gunner on one of the bombers he had in World War II, and he was shot down and died before I got to know him. But what was your reasoning, and where did you find this? I know you're in the air. You fly. You're one of the airmen. You retired 20 years in. But what made you say, hey, you know what? I want to talk about this. I want to discuss it. Nobody's ever discussed it before. And then why did you find out that it hadn't been discussed before? It hadn't been put out in the spotlight more so? Because to me, this would be a heck of a recruiting tool. And these are the stories that young guys like myself would have wanted to hear about coming in. This is the heroism stories, the sacrifice, the civilian sacrifice, and also, of course, the destruction of infrastructure that you see in every war that comes in. But that's part of the story that I like to read about. So what was your first indication? Like, say, I got to write about this, and then also as you followed it through, what kept you going to continue to tell the story and continue to write? So you wrote the book.
Those are excellent questions. The way Operation Halyard first came to my attention was I began to get interested in some of the special operations of World War II and started researching that. And Halyard was one of many ops by the Office of Strategic Services, the OSS. And that was quite a swashbuckling organization. Just some of the stuff they pulled off was astounding. And I'm an old airlifter myself. I was a flight engineer on C-130s and C-5s. So naturally, I looked at Operation Halyard from an airlifter point of view. And what struck me is just what they were able to accomplish with World War II technology and C-47s. I mean, what they did with Operation Halyard with the equipment they had would be challenging even now with modern aircraft and night vision goggles. But yet they did it, sometimes landing on a dirt airstrip at night with the field lit by nothing but burning hay bales. I mean, wow. These guys pulled it off because they didn't realize it was impossible. They didn't know they couldn't do it, so they went and did it. It's just astounding. So that begs the question, given that you had such a terrific rescue mission, why wasn't it publicized? You would think it would be a great morale boost for people on the home front. You would think it would be a great morale boost for troops in the field, and you'd think this would be splashed all over Life magazine, and it would be all over the newsreels in the movie theaters, but it wasn't. And the reason it wasn't, like so many things that have to do with Yugoslavia, it's complicated. Well, actually, the primary reason isn't so complicated. It was plain old operational security. Okay. They didn't know that they wouldn't have to keep going back and getting more of these guys. But even after the flights ended, it was still kept under wraps because of political and diplomatic sensitivities. For one thing, at the time, the Soviets were our allies in fighting the Germans, and there was some concern about ruffling feathers in Moscow if we made a big deal about how we just worked so closely with these non-communist guerrillas fighting the communist guerrillas. So there was that. There was also some concern about ruffling feathers in London. The British were and are our closest allies, but there were elements of the British government who favored working with the partisans, not because they had any sympathy with communists, but because they just felt the partisans were more effective in fighting the Germans. So there was that. And then further complicating the situation was the fate of the non-communist guerrilla, the Chetnik leader, General Draza Mihailovich. His side eventually lost the Yugoslav Civil War. And in 1946, Tito's government arrested him and put him on trial for high treason and war crimes. And in that same year, they executed him by firing squad. And I think it was seen as something of an embarrassment to the U.S. that after General Mihailovich had done so much to help rescue our downed airmen, we were not able to apply diplomatic pressure to save his life. So that's another reason why this thing was so sensitive and just not talked about much. Now, General Mihailovich's legacy is controversial, but after his execution, his reputation was rehabilitated to the point where the Truman administration posthumously awarded him the Legion of Merit Chief Commander for his role in rescuing these airmen.
Wow. It sounds, honestly, it just sounds so familiar from what's going on as far as, we have local nationals helping our own troops, helping us win wars, and then we kind of leave them behind. And it sounds, I don't think we ever learn from our mistakes in that aspect, but it's still, to me, on a positive side, to see that there are local national civilians that are always willing to stick their necks out to help the U.S. and help our service members and those guys on the ground who don't care about the politics. And to me, that shows just amazing how the human spirit is, regardless of what ethnicity or what country you live in. What's right is right, and humanity does take forefront in the majority of the time, and civilians. I admire that. Working in Afghanistan and Iraq quite a bit as well, and then also Libya and Yemen. The locals there always treated us well. The ones that we weren't fighting, the terrorists, and my heart goes out to all of them, and especially now with this as well. How many of those locals actually lost their lives, and Tom, I don't know. Do you have a number on that? Did they ever come through that they said, hey, this is how many Yugoslavians lost their lives helping U.S. airmen? And the reason I ask that, I guess, just being in the military myself, it just shows selfless service, and I admire that in any person, whoever you are. But was there a number of Yugoslavians that did lose their lives? And I didn't see it in the book. Maybe I missed it. But that you'd come across during your research to help Americans out of there?
I'm sure that number is out there. To be honest, I don't know it off the top of my head, but that your point does remind me of something, though. I could relate to you sort of not a 30,000 foot statistic, but a personal story.
Please.
That really brought home this whole episode to me. I knew someone who actually inspired one of the characters in Red Burning Sky. When you read the novel, you read from the points of view of three different main characters. One is one of the downed airmen. Another of the main characters is and these characters are all fictional. There's a C-47 rescue pilot, and there are chapters from his point of view. And then there are chapters from the point of view of a young Serbian guerrilla named Vaza, a teenage guerrilla. And believe it or not, that character was inspired by someone I knew. And knowing this individual really gave me a sense of the commitment and courage of these people who helped us in Yugoslavia. But in the 1980s, when I was a student at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, I took a terrific course in Russian novels. And the professor was a gentleman named Dr. Vaza Mihailovich, no relation to General Mihailovich that I know of. That's a common Serbian family name. And he just kept us spellbound with interest in these Russian novels, but he also kept us spellbound with his personal story, because as a teenager, he had picked up a rifle and fought communists and Germans at the same time. Wow. And so you can imagine the stories that he had. And when his side lost the Yugoslav Civil War, he found it prudent to leave Yugoslavia. And he spent 5 years in refugee camps in Italy and in Germany. And finally, in 1951, my future professor made his way to the U.S. And he said when he arrived in New York Harbor, they gave him an envelope with $50 and a bus ticket to Kansas City. He rides the bus to Kansas City, gets a job he doesn't like. So he moves to Detroit and gets a job on a Chrysler assembly line. And while working that assembly line, he paid his way through college. And he got his undergraduate degree, his master's degree, and his PhD. And he became a respected scholar of Russian and East European literature. And that's how he came to be my professor. I don't think he was a soldier by nature. He was in his element when he was sitting by the fire with a glass of brandy and a good book. But in his youth, when he was a teenager, he picked up a weapon and did what he felt he had to do. And you really have to respect that.
Yeah, I'm wondering, Tom, are just you being a student of history at that time and learning from these great people, is that what inspired you to become a writer? Is that what inspired this type of work from you getting out of service in 2013?
It certainly did. People like Dr. Mihailovich inspired me. My grandfather inspired me. He was a World War II veteran. He had been a mechanic on B-17 flying fortresses with the 94th Bomb Group, and I grew up hearing his stories. And I always loved reading about World War II, and I've always been very interested in not just the history, but also the literature of that period. I've been a fan of some of the great novels about World War II written by veterans, novels that were big in the mid-20th century. Authors like Norman Mailer, James Jones, novels like From Here to Eternity, The Thin Red Line, The Naked and the Dead by Mailer. It's just always been a fascinating area for me.
What made you take that leap of going from a guy, doing military service who's been in combat to becoming a fiction and nonfiction author?
That's a good question. I've actually sort of lived a dual career in aviation and in writing pretty much all my adult life. When I was in college, I was torn between studying journalism or going into Air Force ROTC and pursuing a full-time active duty career. And at the time, I chose to study journalism, and in my youthful ignorance, I thought I had to choose one or the other and never look back. So I pursued writing and journalism pretty single-mindedly for a long time. I worked for the Associated Press for 10 years. And when we were covering the Gulf War, we did a lot of human interest stories about people that I thought were very interesting. And these were people in the Guard and Reserve who were getting activated and deployed for Desert Shield and Desert Storm. And they had these interesting double lives where they pursued their civilian careers, but then they had these military jobs. And one of the people that we featured was a guy who was a television reporter in Louisiana, and he was also an Air Force Reserve pilot. And that kind of sounded familiar to me, a journalist with an interest in military aviation. And I thought, well, heck, if he can do that, I can do that too. So I went into the Air National Guard and became a C-130 flight engineer. And then also, I'd always been interested in writing fiction. but I never had a good idea for a novel that I could really sink my teeth into until 9/11 came along and my unit started getting activated and deployed for Afghanistan operations and then later Iraq. And that gave me plenty of material to work with. So my first 6 novels were novels set in present day conflicts. And then, as I said, I'd always been interested in World War II, and I finally got around to writing a World War II novel titled Silver Wings, Iron Cross, and thoroughly enjoyed the process of writing that, and sort of stayed in that genre of historical novels. And Red Burning Sky is my second novel set in World War II.
I'm just curious if your experience as a veteran, as a guy who served in these countries, has it really helped you as a writer? Because we've had writers on the show like Brad Thor who don't have military service, like myself, and they rely on other people, whether it's Morgan and Marcus Luttrell, to say, hey, am I getting the lingo right? Am I getting all the technicalities right? I'm wondering if someone like yourself, like a Jack Carr that we've had on, who also served and now writes fiction, is it much easier for you to translate what you did into your books?
I think it is. I mean, there's never any substitute for experience. Of course, now that I'm writing World War II novels, I don't know what it was like to fly a B-17 in combat, but having flown in hostile fire zones, I'm at least familiar with the emotions, the way that your primary concern is you don't want to let down your buddies, and you're thinking, please, Lord, don't let me screw this up. And that feeling you get when those red lights start coming up at the aircraft, and when you're in harm's way. The technical stuff is actually the easiest part. I mean, I can't go out and fly a B-17 whenever I want, but there are ways to get at that piece of it too. And believe it or not, one of the best ways is YouTube. Someone, probably several someones, has done us authors and historians a great favor by uploading a lot of World War II training films to YouTube. And you can watch a film that a World War II pilot trainee would have been shown on how to fly the B-17, how to fly the C-47s. And what struck me when I first started watching those training films is just how good they were. They enlisted some A-list Hollywood talent to write, direct, and act in those training films. And they are as good as any training film I've ever seen in the military, except what I saw was in color, and those are in black and white. But they give you really granular level details on how people operated the aircraft back then, and not just pilot training films too. I mean, you can find great training films on how they packed parachutes back then, how to clean an M1, just anything you can imagine. There's a training film there for it, and that makes it quite easy to research that kind of thing.
I have a question on not the book per se, but your experiences, and because I do like to hear of experiences and combat experiences. I don't know, just because it's still the kid in me, even though I've seen a little bit myself from time to time. One thing, when you first started getting in and you started to, you were in your first scenario where you're getting shot at, and there's tracers coming up at your bird, and we have a lot of young listeners that are thinking about joining the service, and I want them to hear what actually goes through your head, because that's what I wanted to hear before I joined, and it kind of preps you. It does. It preps you for the expectation of when I go in, this is what I can expect. And it may change people's minds that maybe this isn't for me. Maybe I don't need to be here. Maybe I'm not ready for something like this. So yeah, Tom, could you maybe, if you can, go a little bit in depth in your first experience where you really thought your life was in danger, and I know maybe it'll help a youngster out there either decide to join or maybe say, hey, this isn't for me, and go to and do something else. So I'd like to hear, because everybody has a different sort of experience from that. So and your mindset and what got you through that time where, hey man, your humanity, your life, hey, this could be it. How'd you push through it? How'd you persevere?
That's a terrific question. And at least for those of us in the flying business, in my limited experience, when you come under fire, it happens so fast and then it's over so fast. You don't have time to get scared in the moment. If you get scared, it's later when you're looking back on it and you think what could have happened. I'll give you an example. I remember one night in May of 2003. So this wasn't long after Operation Iraqi Freedom kicked off. I was with a C-130 crew, and we were taking off from Baghdad International Airport about 11 o'clock at night. And just as we were climbing out, shortly after we brought up the gear, some bad guys launched on us with what we believe was a shoulder-fired heat-seeking missile, probably an SA-7, which is one of the older tech shoulder-fired missiles. And I'll just describe it the way we experienced it. Just all of a sudden, the missile warning tones in the aircraft went off, which is this gosh-awful be-do, be-do, be-do warning tone. And then our defensive systems activated automatically. The defensive system kicked out flares, which are help fool a heat-seeking missile. And our aircraft commander, the left seat pilot, was a terrific pilot, and he responded immediately by making the appropriate maneuver. I probably can't get into a lot of detail about that, but just all of a sudden there was this flash when these flares went out. The cockpit lit up like the sun. There's these god-awful warning lights, and now we're in this steep turn. And maybe for a second I thought, oh my goodness, we've been hit. And then I realized, wait a minute, I didn't feel any impact. The airplane is still flying. Let's stick with our procedures and do what we're supposed to do. And in much less time than it takes to tell it, it was over.
Wow.
So then we're wings level, flying back to base. And for the rest of that flight, we were just about silent, except for the checklist that we had to run. We were so quiet. Every now and then the aircraft commander would come on the interphone and say, hey, are you guys all right? And everybody would check in, co-pilot's okay, navigator's okay, engineer's okay. We were all fine, but we were just kind of in stunned silence. And as I said, it happened so fast. You didn't have time to get scared in the moment.
Do you value, and I always value this, I tell people all the time, the importance of training to prepare you for that, so you can go into habitual mode, you can get through all that. Do you agree with that? And how difficult was your training to beforehand? So you prepared you before you were starting to fly combat missions. How arduous was it? And did it help you, or did you think that no, the training wasn't really adequate? We just got through it by sheer will and guts.
Training was paramount, and I have to give a lot of credit to my old commander, Colonel Jesse Thomas, and I hope he hears this because I think the world of that officer. I remember even before 9/11, his philosophy with our training was that you are going to be not just qualified, but proficient in everything this airplane can do. And that includes airdrop, low level, using night vision goggles, all of that stuff. Not only are you going to be qualified and fill the squares, you're going to be proficient. And he was very demanding about that. And I once had an interesting conversation with him. I was talking to him because I was working on a nonfiction book that was an oral history of my unit's missions in Iraq and Afghanistan. And I asked him his command philosophy. And what he said was very interesting. He said, when you're in a combat zone, you're going to have enough stress on you just being in a combat zone. You don't need the additional stress of figuring out how to use your night vision goggles or how to operate the defensive systems on the airplane or just all of the technical stuff of doing your job. That stuff needs to be second nature. So he said he felt, as he put it, he said, I'm not getting it exactly word for word, but basically he said, I feel it's my job to make sure you're proficient because that takes stress off of you and makes you that much more prepared and safe in a combat zone. And that was the truth. He was a very demanding commander, but he did us a great favor because when 9/11 happened and we got deployed, we were ready.
No, that's great. I agree. I completely agree with that. You need to make where everything is second nature, habitual, and then when stuff happens, you're able to react efficiently, and it creates that efficiency. So completely agree with that. But coming back to the book, the message of heroism, the message of just intestinal fortitude, of course, But on Red Burning Sky, and then even some of your other fiction books, is there any underlying message that you're really trying to get through to the readers? Of course, being entertained, you got to have an entertaining book to be successful, and of course, your books are. But is there something else in there that maybe I'm missing? I see the heroism because of I understand that, and even in a fiction book, because of your experience, the names may be fictional, but like you said, and I agree with this, the characters and the reactions are not fictional. They're coming from some place that you've seen or you experienced before. But is there anything else from the books that you want people to get out of them? Is there something maybe I'm missing? A sense of patriotism or love for country, love for I guess I'm just pulling things out of an old plethora of old sayings, but is there anything that we're missing that maybe you want us to actually to look at when we're reading the books? You want us to pull out of there, aside from the heroism and the courage that's displayed by your characters in their books?
Well, what I hope to do is put readers in the shoes of the characters and help them feel what it's like to be there, to feel the cold and the heat and the pain, to smell the smells, to feel the emotions. In another recent interview, somebody asked me an excellent question, and that is, what is the difference between fiction and nonfiction when it comes to learning history? And my answer was, of course, with learning history, nonfiction is essential, and that's the starting point for learning history. But what I hope to do as a fiction writer is to give the reader empathy, to not just tell the reader what happened, but to help the reader understand what it might have felt like to be there. So that's if I could choose one thing that I hope readers will take away from my work, it would be that.
That's awesome. I think people are really going to dig this book if they check it out. Anyone into historical fiction, and I feel like Kensington has such a great lineup of authors who have served. Guys like who we've had on the show, like General A.J. Tata or Anderson Harp, who I've interviewed before, who's a retired Marine. So you guys are really doing great stuff over there. And once again, the book is Red Burning Sky. So check it out. It'll be out Tuesday because we're going to have this show up on Monday. And you can check out TomYoungBooks.com, at Thomas W. Young on Twitter, and at T Young Books on Instagram. It's great to have you on. And it's actually great to not only learn about this book and the history of what inspired the book, but also learn a little bit about your history. And I think that's kind of what we do here.
Man, much kudos to you and your bravery, brother.
Well, thanks so much. It's been an honor to talk to you, and I certainly appreciate the opportunity.
Thanks,
God
Tom.
bless, Tom.
That's all for this episode of the Battleline Podcast, but we'll be back on Monday with more American Straight Talk. Until then, be sure to follow us on Instagram at Battleline Podcast and on Twitter at Battleline Pod. To sign up for future Battleline tactical courses, go to www.christantoparanto.net. Believe in yourself, face all challenges head on, and as always, never quit.